In Kentucky, there is an area known as the land between the lakes. This is a beautiful natural area filled with trees, rivers, bogs, and all manner of other things that would make any outdoorsman cry. However, there's also something else in that area. A deep, dark mystery, and potentially a monster that rivals any of our deepest, darkest fears. A man-wolf hybrid that is vicious and has potentially been in that land for nearly 200 years. Hey guys, welcome back to Campfire and Gunsmoke. This is Nate, your host, and today we're going to do the first of our cryptid files. Now, these files are basically my love of cryptids and other spooky stories from the woods coming full frontal for you. And today, we're going to do one that I've been seeing a lot of traction of, and I was actually very unaware of until recently. The Beast of the Land Between the Lakes. I'm going to go through the beast morphology, any wikis I can find, eyewitness accounts, reports, and we're going to try to figure out if this creature really exists, and if it does, what is it exactly, assuming that it is not a monster or not. Now, I'm a total skeptic when it comes to cryptids and monsters, but I do believe that within every myth and legend there is a kernel of truth, and I want to find out what that truth actually is. I've done some research on the matter, and I hope you all will enjoy our first ever cryptid file. Let's get right into it. Let's have a good time. First and foremost, what is the cryptid, the beast of the land between the lakes? Well, as I alluded to in the intro, the beast of the land between the lakes has been most often reported as a werewolf-like creature. Its appearance has varied from story to storytelling. Some say it's more like your traditional fantasy, where it's a larger, hairier, kind of more muscular beast. Others have said it actually looks like a regular wolf, just stretched out and elongated, more Professor Lupin from Harry Potter than an actual like werewolf we think of when we think of a transformation. And with that, you get all the stereotypical trappings: the glowing eyes, the claw, the five-finger claws, and all that kind of good jazz. Now, the real question kind of comes into, what is this creature? Now, as I alluded to earlier, in the 1800s, there was an individual that lived in the area when it was known as the land between the rivers, not the land between the lakes, before it was dammed up and created into lake country, that was known to have a disease that turned him mad at night. Now, people weren't sure what was going on with that. Obviously, the 1800s didn't have the medical science we had at the time, but it's probably safe to assume it was some form of schizophrenia or something of this nature, causing him to become mad and violent when the sun went down, which I'm not a super big psychologist or psychiatrist, so I don't know if that's an actual thing, but that would be my guess as an amateur, cryptozoologist. Because there was, in these early reports, there was no report that it was him becoming a wolf or anything like that, like your traditional European werewolf kind of when the sun goes down situation. It was purely a case of going mad. Now, eventually people found his homestead and his family, everything was missing. There was nobody. It was completely abandoned. Now, in the 1900s, the local tribes said there might be a skinwalker or something in the area, which, if you're familiar with how skinwalkers behave, this starts to find a little bit more of the legend that would eventually become the beast of the land between the lakes, as well as French trappers at the same time thinking there was a loup-garou, which is basically French for werewolf. There's starting to get some synergy of what is actually going on in this area. Now, in more modern times, there's stories from like the 1973 when a group of college students went out and were hiking and camping in the area, and then they were attacked one night by one of these creatures, or possibly multiple of these creatures, leaving damage on their Volkswagen bus as they fled the area and went back to their college in absolute shock and terror. Now, they only realized the damage was actually done when they got back to college, because that was when the only time they were actually, felt safe enough to get out and check the vehicle. There's also been reports of, one report I found that was a 10-year-old boy at the time was out with a camping with a friend's family, and they were attacked by possibly multiples of this creature, and everyone except for the 10-year-old boy was killed. Now, this story I wanted to bring up in particular because of the interesting way that they were supposedly dispatched, as well as the police response to the actual story. Now, there were no names for this, and I couldn't really find a hard, fast date on when it happened, but I know it happened some time ago, possibly in the 1980s or late 1970s. Now, the story basically went that a boy went out with his friend's family, which consisted of mom, older sister, his friend, and his friend's dad. They were all hiking, hunting. They had a couple of shotguns with them, so they felt fairly safe and protected. But on one night, this creature attacked his friend, basically eviscerating him, killing him almost instantly. The father of the group shot at the creature, but his rifle was loaded with birdshot, and it basically did nothing except piss off the beast, which then proceeded to attack the father by biting him in the neck and clawing him up. Then the storyteller manages to get a shot off at the beast, and this seemingly actually hurted it. It slumped over. The storyteller was in so much fear that he crawled up underneath the RV that they were staying in order to stay safe. At which point the two women were attacked by possibly another or even maybe the same beast. The storyteller recounts that the most terrifying and unnerving part of that was the way their screams went absolutely silent. Now, when the police were eventually notified and law enforcement was brought into the area, the thing that the storyteller relates that he thought was the most curious was the lack of predation. If this was an actual animal, you would assume that there would have been more animal predation going on. But the two women almost looked like they had their necks broken as opposed to it being any kind of like bite or laceration or something of this nature. And in fact, the storyteller in his own recount of it thought that the wolf was actually a man in a wolf suit. So there's possibility here that the actual killing itself could have been something more akin to a serial killer or something like this, or a group of serial killers that all wear wolf skins or something like that. This also kind of leans into the whole idea of what a skinwalker is, and we'll get into skinwalkers in a later video, but the idea is it's a witch or evil medicine man from Native American folklore that has decided to make a deal with the evil spirits of the world and then can now change his form or their form into any kind of animal, most often changing it into some kind of mystical wolf, but not a wolf that moves in the correct way. When you're actually looking at a skinwalker, they move like a human wearing a wolf suit, but from a distance they would seem like they're a wolf. Now we come to the really big question. If we're going to make an assumption that the beast of the land between the lakes does actually exist, what is it? Is it really a werewolf? Is it a large wolf or maybe a bear or some other large, canine-like dog that's being encountered out there? Or is it simply a matter of hysteria? And this kind of comes into a situation where it's really hard to tell, guys. I'm going to be honest with you. We don't have any photo evidence outside of, the usual incredibly grainy, there's the beast right there kind of questionable footage. So it's going to be really hard to prove one thing or another. There very well could be a possibility that the beast of the land between the lakes actually does exist. There's so much wilderness in the United States that people don't really realize is there. And in this wilderness, it's very easy to get lost and hide if you want to. And if we're going to assume that this creature is an actual creature and not just a person dressing up as a creature, then it would be very adept at hiding in its local environment as well as hunting in its local environment, as it is described to be a wolf, and as we all know, wolves are particularly adept hunters. So now the question really comes down to, if there is a werewolf, and if there is the beast of the land between the lakes, is it a real creature? Now, if we're going to make an assumption about a large werewolf-like creature, I think it's very safe to assume that it probably doesn't exist, or at the very least it isn't a werewolf. It's probably most likely a large wolf that's being encountered, in particular because a lot of the stories I've found do describe it not as necessarily more man than wolf. It's a little bit more of very large wolf, not particularly man, but that's the best way to describe it, especially when you're being, attacked by it. But then we come to the question of the stories of the animal predation, with very few of the stories actually having any sort of, wolf eating or anything like that. And to my knowledge, wolves do not kill for fun. That is something that large cats do and various other, predators. But from my understanding of it, Wolves don't kill for fun. They're very much a eat, hunt, but mostly scavenger kind of creature. Why is it being reported as a werewolf? I don't know. I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea. I personally like to think they exist, and I like to think that these stories aren't made up, mostly because it's more fun that way. But it also kind of brings us to the question of how would you defend yourself against something like this from what they describe? And well, luckily the loot guru doesn't sound like it's a mystical, magical, invincible creature. It sounds like regular, conventional safety measures will take care of it. So at the very least, stay safe out there with that, guys. You never know what you're actually going to encounter in the woods. You know, bears are definitely a thing, wolves, cougars, various other things that could cause you harm. So, you know, it's a good safety practice to keep some bear mace or some kind of protection on you at any point when you're out in the woods either way. Obviously, you know, bear mace will probably work best for most people. It's the most affordable and it's usually handles itself pretty well, but you kind of have to be knowing how to use that. But other than that, you're looking at larger caliber firearms in order to take care of anything that's a particularly large, vicious monster. So I would just stay safe out there and keep a can of bear mace on you at any point. So I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Cryptid Files. I will hopefully have a new podcast out coming either this week or next week, and it's going to be the same name, Campfire and Gunsmoke, although it's going to be the Campfire and Gunsmoke podcast. This will be a longer form kind of discussion. That way we can talk about different subjects, you know, better things about the outdoors. Maybe we'll talk about trucks, cars, for going outside, you know, different things to be a better citizenship or different things to be a better outdoor citizen, so that way you guys aren't going to be going out there and taking, you know, trashing up the nature and all that kind of good jazz, as well as ways for young men and young women to just better their lives in general from a big brother, older cousin kind of perspective instead of some kind of dad figure. So I hope you guys will join us for that when that starts coming out. I'll let you guys know. Other than that, have a wonderful day out there, guys. Stay safe out there. Try to clean up the woods if you're ever out that way. Leave the land more beautiful than when you left it. Take nothing but pictures and garbage out, and leave nothing but footprints. Have a good one, guys. I hope you stay safe out there, and I hope this story didn't spook you too much and you'll go out hike sometime. Or maybe it inspired you to go hunt down a cryptid. Either way, enjoy the outdoors, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.